what finally got me is that I moved to Hawaii when I was like 26, and I just got to my knees. I was in the most beautiful place on earth, and I was about ready to commit suicide. I had a stint when I was like 21 and a half where I'd done a bunch of substances, and I came close to committing suicide at that point. I had the thought, but like right at 27, I was sitting on a beach, and I felt like I couldn't stop drinking, I couldn't stop using, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want my life to go anymore. And really, the only thing that stopped me from committing suicide at that time with I mean, I had depression, I had anxiety, I had anger, I had all that just intense, and I really
Yeah.
felt like I could not quit. And I remember like sitting on the beach and thinking about how I was going to take my life. And there's all these people that are rich and married and in love on their honeymoons there, and I'm just miserable, at 27
Yeah.
years old in the
Yeah.
most beautiful place on earth. And literally, I was thinking about how I was going to take my life out. And the
Mm.
only thing that really stopped me is I felt like, man, my mom and dad, I'm an only child, and I was like, I can't do that to them. I can't do that to my mom and dad. And I was like, I
Yeah.
remember I ended up no call, no show on Super Bowl Sunday of January 30th of 2000 was my last day of using and drinking. And some people showed up at my house after I didn't show up to work. Nowhere else in the world that would have happened, but in Lahaina is a small little town in Maui, and that's a town that actually just burnt down, a year and a half ago. It's kind of crazy, surreal, but
Yeah.
these little guy from Alabama and this little girl that I kind of liked at the time, a little surfer girl, knocked on my door and they're like, "Hey," and I'm like, my lips are all burnt, my eyes are all big, and they say, "Hey, everybody at work's worried about you." And then so I ended up going the next day, and then they said, "Hey, we got rumors that you're partying, doing all this stuff. We're going to give you a chance. We're not going to fire you. We're going to put you on probation for 30 days, and give you an opportunity to still work." So like they took away all my privileges. But at
Hmm.
that time, and I remember there was a lady. It was kind of like God gave a couple angels at them. I didn't notice that till later, but the one manager, her name was Thule, and then her daughter, Patty B, she worked as a waitress there. But Patty, when I walked out the office, I wasn't really even close with her. We weren't really friends, but she came up and hugged me and says, I come to find out she had like 5 years in recovery. So she knew I was messed up. And it was like God used her to give me some hope. And then the mom was like, "Hey, you know, you need to get help. You can't do what you're doing alone." And so like that night, I walked into my first AA meeting at 27 years old, and I've
Wow.
been sober ever since that day. And then at like 30 days, my mom wrote me a letter and said, "Hey, I said this prayer." Her sobriety date is January 28th of 2000. My sobriety date, or it's January 31st of 2000. So on January 28th, she had 3 years sobriety, and her exact prayer was, "God, bring my son to the rooms of AA, and whatever you do with him after that is up to you." That was her exact prayer. 3 days later, I called my
Wow.
mom up and was like, "Hey, I just went to this AA meeting, and they're smoking a lot of cigarettes and drinking coffee. Not my thing, but I do like my coffee now."
Right.
Just keep my brain going.
Yeah.
Um, but 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 yeah, so I walked in and it was like I said, "This is the first place I've ever been, even besides church at the time, that I felt like people genuinely gave a crap about me." And I said, "I think I'm gonna give it to her."
Yeah.
My mom like freaked out, but she waited a little while to write the letter, like, "Hey, I know I was a horrible mom to you, and you know, looking back, like, was there anything weird or coincidental that people tried to help you or this and that?" And then I was like, "Wow, there was all kinds of stuff like God." And she said that prayer, and it was like I was just like, "Wow." So it was like once again, I didn't go chase after God. I did my thing in A real
Mm.
hardcore for the first probably 3 or 4 years because I had a hard time with church stuff that I encountered when I was young. So it was kind of closed minded towards it.
Right.
But God kept working on me, and through doing the steps, like they say, when you get to this
Hmm.
12 step, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, that's what happened. I just kept seeking, and people kept coming to my life, and I kept getting invited to different churches. And then next thing I know,
Wow.
I found something that's stable. I found a church in Vacaville. Then when I moved up here, I found Bayside, and met Michael. Michael was my first Christian mentor.
Mm.
He's been a good man to me. I've had a funny. All my mentors have been Michael, and my middle name is Michael. I've had an AA sponsor, Michael Mulholland. Had another at another church when I actually got married and divorced. I think you remember that. But my ex, I was only married for 3 years. But
Yeah.
Michael Cook was at Calvary Christian Center, El Paso Heights, and then Michael Baggett. So it's kind of funny. All Michaels.
And in radio, everybody's named Dave. So there you go.
Dave, there you go.
No idea why. Just like surrounded by Daves. So
That's
this
funny.
is cool. So Christianity, I mean, I got like radically saved too in Portland, Oregon, of all places. I mean, who gets saved in Portland? But I think
I
it's
know.
interesting because now and I don't know if it just feels like everywhere is like weirdness and witchcraft and there's so many things like, I mean, I think it's cool that you found your way to a church instead of some other weird thing. I mean, was that just a no-brainer for you that it would
No,
be the
I think
God?
that my uncle was real religious, back then I remember going to like the First Baptist Church of Pacheco, and I
Okay.
remember my uncle would sing worship, and then his wife, then they ended up separating, and she ended up dying. A lot of things happened crazy in my mom's side. People that I looked up to, like my uncle just died like 2 days ago that I looked up to. He was like a big brother to me. He had cancer and then just 65 years old just died. It's like, it's just solid Christian man, raised solid Christian kids, but it's like you just don't understand the why now, sometimes. Um, but yeah, my uncle always brought me to church. My cousins would, and I remember going there. And then at that age, I kind of always felt like it was fire and brimstone. Like I'm going to hell anyway, so I might as well just party, because
Right?
Baptist was hardcore. But
Right?
but I remember I remember the first real influence when my aunt would play the piano and sing the hymns, like it would move me to the core. I remember
Mm,
like feeling God's presence. Didn't really understand what it was at that point, but I know
yeah.
those were the original seeds that got planted that attracted me. And like I remember seeing them, thinking that they were a Leave It to Be family, but they weren't. But I remember thinking like, oh, one day I want to be like that. You know what I mean? Like that seed was planted where I was like, okay, that seems good. I don't come from that background, but there was something that was attractive to me. And then so eventually, once I got sober and God just kept showing me things, and my grandmother was like a Bible Belt Christian from Nebraska, and she
Mm-hmm.
always prayed for me and my mom for decades. She always thought me and my mom were going to die because of drugs and alcohol. I
Yeah.
remember one time when I think I was like maybe like 22, 23. My grandma told one of my little cousins, was like, hey, my little cousin who idolized me comes up to me and was like, hey, grandma's really worried about you. She thinks you're on drugs. And I remember that just sunk me because I loved my grandma. I would show up to events still, partying, but she said that. And I was just like, oh man, like that just hurt me to the core that my grandma knew that I was, not doing good, So it was like that. I
Mm-hmm.
remember those little pieces, but my grandma always never judged. She was like the heart of a real Christian woman, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like old school Christian Bible Belt woman that just loved like Jesus, you know what I mean? So I always remember that, and that was attractive to me, So
Was there a like so with AA like a step or something that just was radical for you for that piece, and then also, in the Bible? I mean, because I know for me, like it took me years to understand the serenity piece, which I'm still grabbing. Then also another 10 years. I mean, I was sober 10 years before I understood how totally codependent I was, that I wasn't
mm,
even as much of an alcoholic as just a complete codependent. Like, I didn't even know who I was. And
yeah,
so it was working through all that insanity. Now I don't drink at all, but if I did, I don't even know if I'd be an alcoholic anymore because of all the mental health I've had to work through. If that makes sense. I mean, it was
yeah,
just unbelievable how just because of the background that I came from, if that makes sense. I mean, how did you work through all that? Was there certain pieces of scripture and where you just really felt God, or certain like for me, acceptance is the key to all my problems today when I'm disturbed. Like that whole thing is just like, whoa. There's not really a question, and it's just you know what I'm saying.
yeah. I think for me, a combination of like from the 12 steps, I remember like going through steps 4 and 5, where you write down all your crud and you share it with another man. And I remember the guy I had in Hawaii, Mike Mulholland. I'm actually friends with him. He lives in the Philippines now too. It's kind of funny, but he was lived in the islands. And I remember then he's like, oh, for this you were a punk. For this you were a punk. You know what I mean? He goes, but
Yeah,
remember, today you're not that punk anymore. You're
yeah,
sober. You're not a piece of turd anymore. And the way he put
right.
it to me was like, it was kind of direct, but I like that. For me, I like that. Um, and so I was young. I was 27 years old. I had big old hoop earrings, big old goatee. Trying to be a cool kid.
Mm-hmm.
And bleached hair because trying to fit in with the surfer kids in Hawaii, all that. But I just like that was a start of it where it's like, okay, I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person now. But the way he explained it to me back in early in the beginning, he goes, whether you do it in church or whether you do it in AA, he goes, you don't owe me anything. All you owe is to give back. So if you work hard, you stay sober and you help other human beings in some way, shape, or form. That's the biggest, most
Mm.
important thing you can do that the 12-step program teaches you, but it's also biblical. You know what I mean? And but I remember like started going to church too. And like my life scripture is Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed of the renewing of your mind, so you can attest and appease what God's perfect will is for your life. And so when we're
Wow.
living right, when we're renewing our mind with scripture, we're, whether we go through counseling. I had a lot of mental health issues, especially in the beginning: anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
anger, and the devil still tries to get the anger once in a while, or
Yeah.
the lust. Those were the things that I had growing up. So I always got to be cognizant of that. You can't get lazy. You always got to continue to renew your mind. You always got to
Yeah.
continue to do a men's Bible study. You got to continue to help other people. I've coached football for 8 years. I've mentored kids at Bayside for 12 plus years there. So it's like I'm always give back to society. I love
Mm.
taking kids out, fishing trips. I pay for it out of my pocket, but those are things that I do to help my mind because I love to give back. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
I feel like
Yeah.
giving back is what keeps us sound.
Yeah.
And so, and then the other thing that I've done that I learned early on is exercise, because that helps your soul.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
exercise and you eat good, or I know
Hallelujah.
Aaron did, I know
Hmm.
you guys have done that a lot too. I've seen
Yeah.
your guys' journey. But like for me, if I don't exercise, like I remember when I first got sober, I had my mom FedEx a check of Gold's Gym for $202. And I said, can you FedEx it? I need to be in the gym. So I
Yeah.
would go to my meeting. I would go straight to my meeting to the gym. And then I even did outrigger canoe paddling in Hawaii, where like we're paddling water, and I was working out like 3-4 hours a day at 27 years old. But that's what helped me in my mind
Yeah.
to stay busy, when it's early on in sobriety, because you got all this anxiety and different things. You're okay. I partied all this time. How do I live with being sober? It's weird. And so you really got to stay active and fight those demons, especially early on.